Good afternoon. Welcome to the January 29th Fake Snow Day meeting of the Kiwanis Club of Birmingham. Please stand as I invite Sherry Friday to the podium to offer the invitation, please.
Oh, this is a bonus. I didn't know I was doing a pledge too. I'm going to read the prayer of St. Francis, something that was read at my church this week, and I just thought it was it was such a good timing, so I thought it was so nice. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoning, and it is dying that we are born to eternal life. Please bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies, and help that we go out today and make ourselves an example of this love. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sherry, thank you for that invitation. I'd like to invite Club Secretary J.W. Partner to come up for announcements and introduction of guests. J.W.
Thanks, Scott. So this is Chuck Holmes outside his house this morning. Pretty rough out there. Glad you guys could make it. Chuck recently went to Antarctica, and I asked him to share some of his photos. Hopefully, Chuck, as you know, is General Manager at WBHM, and recently got to go down there and spend some time, and I thought the photos were fantastic, and I wanted to share them with you. A couple new WBHM members right there. And actually, this is not Antarctica. This is the latest book signing for Jim Knowles, and we got photos of that. That's really incredible. One announcement for WBHM: StoryCorps is coming to town. For those of us who are fans, you can sign up today. It's here the 12th and 13th of February. One of the several national partnerships that Chuck has brought to town since becoming General Manager at WBHM. If you're not a member, you're missing out. Hall of Fame this week, guys. Make sure you get your nominations in. I did one the other day. It's really, really easy, and it's very joyful because you get to celebrate someone that is important to you and likely very important to the Birmingham community. It's a terrific event every single year. If you wait to the last minute, it only takes a minute. So make sure that you get this done this week. So 29th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. So that is today at Top Golf. Hopefully the weather hasn't chased too many people away. But it's a great thing to go to. JA is a terrific event. Kiwanians are very involved in it. And Top Golf is fun for kids, for those people who are at home today with their children. We have a few guests today, and we have time to introduce them. Brad Baker has a guest.
My guest is Tom Norris. Tom is the Senior Vice President of Morgan Stanley.
Terrific. Mr. Warren, where are you?
Right here. My guest is my wife, Patty, who works on the space shuttle. How about that?
And I have a guest as well, and that's Mr. DeLucas right here. Larry, do you mind standing up? I think Larry he's a scientist, he's an astronaut. I think the thing he'd want to be remembered for is that he's an educator as well, and he's largely responsible for why Robert is speaking to us today. So thanks so much, Larry. And let's give a warm Kiwanis welcome to all of our guests. Turn it back over to Scott.
Thanks, JW. Welcome to all our guests here today and everyone who braved those treacherous conditions. I have to say, I appreciate what James Fannin and the rest of our weather men do, weather people. You know, I think if I lived in Chicago and I tapped into our newscast this morning, I'd be laughing pretty hard, especially when I saw a field reporter take her, what was it, a laser thermometer out to record the temperature of the ground. Wow, what a moment. But anyway, enough of that. Really excited. We still got a really great turnout here today for Robert Lightfoot, and to really get an inside look at NASA. So thanks for being here. But before we do that, we new members are the lifeblood of our club, and we have a new member introduction today. So I invite the priest Waddy to the podium to introduce John Montgomery.
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to introduce the club to John Montgomery. If you don't know John, he is the founder and owner of Big Communications. He founded Big in 1995, and Big is headquartered a couple of blocks from here on 2nd Avenue North. Big has a staff of about 60, and they're a full-service marketing, PR, interactive, strategy, content, video, and media firm to more than 70 clients regionally, nationally, and internationally. Big's largest client is Valvoline, based in Lexington, Kentucky. In 2013, Big was named Small Agency of the Year Southeast by Ad Age Magazine and was the first Alabama agency to be honored with this designation. I've admired John's work and his team's creativity as they've worked with us at my organization as CEO. I've gotten to know John, and I value his friendship and his counsel. We both grew up on the West Side, and we share a passion for helping children in our community be more successful. Our dads both worked in the steel industry, and John attended UAB. John also serves on the Rev Board, the Birmingham Museum of Art Advisory Board, the Howard Finster Paradise Garden Board, and he's an alumnus of Leadership Birmingham class of 2010, and he would say best class ever, of course. He's also a silver medal recipient of the American Advertising Federation. John will serve this club well. He is a phenomenal leader and humanitarian, very passionate about his work and his community. John has a lovely wife, Leanne. They've been married for 13 years. They live in Mountain Brook. They have 2 kids, John IV, age 9, and Hans, age 8. Please join me in welcoming John.
Welcome, John. Really glad to have you. Been working on this for a number of years now. So glad to have John finally in the club, and hope you'll quickly get engaged with one of our committees or be out of the badge station in the next few weeks, so you can get to know more members and members can get to know you. So welcome. All right, let's get on to the program. So let's introduce the head table. So the priest Waddy, who you just heard from, Executive Director of the JCCEO, Kiwanis since June 2018. John Montgomery, new member just introduced by the priest. Dan Pyle, President and CEO, YMCA of Greater Birmingham, Kiwanis since January 2018. J.W. Carpenter, Executive Director, Birmingham Education Foundation, Kiwanis since 2013. Sherry Friday, Judge Sherry Friday, thanks again for your invitation. Probate Judge, Jefferson County. And finally, Warren Lightfoot, Distinguished Past President of our club, Attorney Partner at Lightfoot, Franklin & White, Kiwanis since 1977, and world-renowned sculptor. Warren has the honor of introducing our speaker. Please join me in recognizing the head table.
Thank you, President Scott. I'm pleased to introduce you to my cousin, Robert Lightfoot Jr., former administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Over the last 24 hours, when Gail and Scott and I have been worried about the weather and worried whether Robert could get here, I kept telling myself, Robert has sent a probe to Saturn. Surely he can get a Lexus from Robert was born in 1963 in Montevallo and got his degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Alabama in 1986. at Alabama. He's now a distinguished fellow in the Department of Mechanical Engineering. He's held several positions at NASA, both in Huntsville and in Houston. In Huntsville, he was director of the Marshall Space Flight Center. He worked for a time at the Stennis Space Center in Hancock County, Mississippi. Robert hasn't told me what he did that resulted in his being sent to Mississippi for 5 years, but I'm sure he never did it again. Actually, he was the director of the propulsion test director at Stennis, so he had a lot of folks working for him. While at NASA, he received the prestigious Presidential Rank Award in 2006, 2010, and 2016. In 2010, he was inducted into the Alabama Hall of Fame for Engineering. In 2018, he retired after 30 years with NASA, and he returned to Huntsville as president of L-Sync. Now, some of you may think, like I did when you first hear the name L-Sync, that must be a rock band. But Robert assures me it's not. In fact, it's a fast-growing consulting firm providing developmental and strategic advice. Just this month, the National Space Club and Foundation announced that Robert will be awarded the 2019 Goddard Trophy in recognition of his exceptional service to our country and its space program. Robert's married to the former Caroline Smith of Huntsville and has 2 grown daughters and 1 grandson. Last week, we heard one of Dr. A.G. Gaston's favorite sayings: "It ain't rocket science." Well, my fellow Kiwanians, my hardcore fellow Kiwanians, today it is rocket science. Please welcome Robert Lightfoot.
Thank you, Warren. I appreciate the introduction. And thank you guys for braving this. I tell you, that trip from Huntsville down was treacherous. I must have seen 20 cars. Didn't see a flake of snow, I just got to tell you. So as we were going back and forth last night, I said, let's just see what happens. And so it was nice to see that I could get this in. And thank you for coming out, seriously. I know everything's shut down, and you might rather be at home, or if you're like me, you'd probably rather be here. What I thought I'd do is I thought I'd take a little bit of time and talk some about my leadership scar tissue is what I call it, that I got while leading in different positions at NASA. I'll kind of give you why I got that scar tissue, but I think some of it's going to be pretty basic for you guys. Most of you are leaders in your respective areas, but I think it's a good reminder for all of us. I do this occasionally. It's mostly therapeutic for me. That I share my leadership lessons, and it's a good reminder for me every time I do it of things that I might not be doing so well in my own organization every day. I was blessed to run what I think is the greatest agency in this country. We were charged with some, as I used to say, we were charged with making the impossible possible, and we did it quite often. And sometimes we did. This week is a really tough week for us as a NASA family. You're always in the NASA family when you've been there. The 3 tragedies we've had in space, in human space flight, actually all occurred within 1 week. Different years, 1 week. January 27th, we lost Apollo 1, Grissom, Chaffee, and Roger White on the pad down at the Cape. January 28th, we lost Challenger, which was yesterday, and February 1st, we lost Columbia. So for NASA, this is the week we call the day. We have a day of remembrance during this week. And if you've ever had one of the most, I don't even know what the right word for it is, very somber, but also a big honor. Represent the agency at the Tomb of the Unknown and lay a wreath there with the wife of the Challenger pilot, commander. It was a pretty amazing thing that I got to do in my career, one of my favorite things that I got to do, because she was just, man, talk about a strong lady. She was amazing. She held me up as I walked up there with that wreath, because it was a tough time. So, anyway, just run through this. Pretty quickly, I call this Lightfoot on leadership, and if you'll notice, and NASA is famous for acronyms, right? That's what we do acronyms like crazy. So Lightfoot on leadership, LOL. You're supposed to laugh. You're supposed to find some humor in this. I think what you'll find for me is that, in my experience at NASA, that being an executive, being at a senior level in a leadership position, that it's really all about our people. It's all about the people that work for you, the people that you support on a daily basis. They're going to take care of you whether you take care of them or not. But if you take care of them, they're going to take care of you in a better way. So everything you see, everything you hear from me today comes off the foundation that it's all about my people, the folks that work with me and for me. I I actually think it's very important for all of us to truly believe that nobody comes through the doors of our offices in a day thinking, I'm going to do a bad job today. I think we need to assume that folks are doing, I call it assume positive intent. Let them prove otherwise, right? But if you assume positive intent with your team, it's amazing what you can see, what you see them do, but it's also amazing to see them in a different light, right? And I used to talk about the fact, how many of you have gone out and bought that special car, it's called the red sports car, because you think you're the only one that's got one. As soon as you buy one, you see like they're all over the place, right? What the heck? I thought I was the only one. Same kind of thing with positive intent. If you see people in a positive light, it's amazing how well you'll see them and how well you'll use them in the future. I think for leadership, I don't think there's any cookbook or owner's manual for leadership. I think there's really probably not a right or wrong way. There's probably some wrong ways, but we won't go into that. But I think you have to find something that works for yourself. All of you have found that at some point, or you wouldn't be here today, you wouldn't be a leader in this community. There's lots of books. You come to my office, you're going to think I'm probably one of the most well-read people there are. I've read like the first 2 chapters of all of them, but I've only read about 3. Okay? Because what I find is if it doesn't connect with me in the first 2 chapters, probably not going to change my leadership style, right? But I do learn. I do learn from those, and I'll talk about that as we go through. I think that we tend to overanalyze leadership sometimes. And I think sometimes it's just taking care of our people. It's pretty simple, and I think most of the things are going to be pretty simple, but it's a good reminder for you to think about how you do that. And when you're leading a very complex organization, a very highly motivated organization that's doing very complex things, you got to find some interesting ways to lead them, right? Because they're all smarter than me. I mean, Larry knows this. You've been in this community. This is a smart bunch of folks, and they're also very hard-headed, right? I know y'all don't have anybody like that in your organization. And to be able to motivate them and get them to go in the direction you want to go is good. And I will say this, I always say this in case there's somebody in the audience that worked for me at one point. I strive to lead this way. I'm not always successful, right? So those of you that, if this was in Huntsville, it'd be a lot better to go. That's just not true. So before I jump into some of my scar tissue, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between leaders and managers. Because I think there's a distinct difference. They're both very important, by the way. They're really important. And what I found throughout my career is that what you find is managers do the right things. Managers do things right. They're very tactical. You gotta have that. But leaders do the right things. And that's a subtle difference, right? You rarely find somebody that can do both, but probably most of the people in this room can do that. I think, one of the Warren Buffett has a quote, the manager asks how and when, and the leader asks what and why. Right? So my job at the agency, especially at the end of my term, I was the longest running acting administrator in NASA history. The previous record was 222 days, and I went for 458, not that I was counting. And I will tell you that during that 458 days, when you're sitting with President Trump and you're sitting with Vice President Pence, having these meetings, and you're sitting there going, man, if my dad would say, are you sure? You're from Montevideo. What are you doing sitting with these guys talking about the future space, right? I mean, you have to think about the why, right, as a leader, the why. And so I would sit with the vice president who's very interested in space, and I would articulate to him what I thought we needed to be doing. And by the way, I rarely talked about the moon and Mars. I rarely talked about the next sensor, or the next trip to Saturn or Jupiter that we were planning on doing. What I found was it was better to talk about jobs, right? Foreign policy, industrial base in this country. And so what you have to learn as a leader is the why is sometimes different than the person sitting there. Now my guys would love to go in and just drone on and on about this particular mission, what it's going to learn, the fact that we're going to measure ice at 1 centimeter from 25,000 miles away on orbit, and then they just watch it blaze over, right? Now the scientists love that conversation, right? They love having that discussion. But politicians, no, they just want to know about jobs. How it's going to affect us from an overall perspective. So it's interesting to learn that for me as an engineer. There's no training for this, right? No training whatsoever. When the president asked me, this came out in the news here a couple weeks ago, I guess, Cliff Sims was writing a book, what something about Team of Vipers, yes. I was in a meeting with the president, he decided to include that in his book, which he didn't tell me about. He's from Best State, I think, by the way, so I'm going to get him one day. But it talks about how, the president asked me if we could get to Mars by 2020. Well, no, the answer is no, right? But before I blurted that out, all I could think about was The Apprentice. And I was waiting for the "you're fired." Right? And so we had a nice dialogue and a nice discussion about that. But the point is, you still have to know what your box is that you're in, and recognize your audience you're talking to. And that's a tough thing for leading, especially when you're leading up and leading down. Right? That's what we do. I found that leading and managing are both very situational. You know, if you're a good leader, you need to adapt to your team as much as they need to adapt to you. And I think people respond differently. Some people respond to a pat on the back, other people respond to money, some to both, right? And I think you just need to figure out what your team does. I think you also got to recognize the power of the people. One of the things that we found at NASA was, you know, for years the old statement, knowledge is king, right? You hold the knowledge, you don't share it. Well, so I'm kind of a geek, you know, obviously I work for NASA. Over the holidays, right, my decompression times, I used to do jigsaw puzzles. Okay, and I don't do them online, by the way. These are like real jigsaw puzzles, not on the computer like everybody does now. Even my mom and dad at 86 have given up on the regular puzzles when you do the stupid thing on TV. I'm like, it's not fair. But I do jigsaw puzzles. Now imagine doing a jigsaw puzzle with no box, right? When you're trying to do something as an organization and you don't share the box top with your team, and they're just a piece of a 1,000-piece puzzle, you don't have a chance in hell of it happen. And so you've got to share the whole story. You've got to share the vision. You've got to share what you're trying to do. And what I found was the more I did that, the more I articulated that to my team, the better off our results were. We weren't always completely successful, right? So to demonstrate this, once I took pieces out of a jigsaw puzzle and I imagine y'all's tables, the same kind of situation. I took my team and I gave everybody like 2 pieces and I said, tell me what we're doing with these pieces. Nobody could figure it out. Now, I held up the box top and it just happened to be someone walking on the moon. And so, you know, except for 2 people, and it was a black and white picture of that. But one table goes, these pieces aren't part of that. What I'd done, because I'm evil, I'd given them 2 pieces from another puzzle. But that's what we do to our team, right? Sometimes we do that and we don't even know we do that, right? So I think it's important to share the whole story. And I know that gives power away sometimes as a leader, but man, if you want your team to produce for you, that's what you've got to do. There's also a lot of dialogue and discussion about are leaders grown or born? There's a book I think called Natural Born Leaders or something like that. And for those of you that haven't been, I do a lot of quotes when I run through this pitch, and I usually give who wrote it, who said it. Sometimes I forget it, but my favorite quote I've ever seen around this, it says, leaders are born with the only thing they need, a backbone. They must grow a wishbone for vision and a funny bone, sense of humor. That's Elaine Agnew. I thought, to me, that was the perfect description of natural born leaders. I mean, you gotta have a backbone, right? You gotta be the guy that makes the decision at the end of the day, right? But at some point, you gotta provide that vision and you better have a sense of humor or this stuff will eat it up. The other part about recognizing your team and the power your team has when you release them, when you release that power is, this is a Teddy Roosevelt quote. Teddy Roosevelt's one of my favorite quotes, by the way. The best executive is the one who has sense enough to pick the right people and the self-restraint to then leave them alone. Let them do what you ask them to do. So that's the power of your people. There's a few tyrannies that we deal with as leaders that I think are important, and especially these days. The first one is the tyranny of the urgent. Right? People come in and want you to do something, they want it now. Right? Now, when I was in Washington, D.C. for the last 6 years, if somebody came in and wanted something urgent for me, I went Alabama on them really fast. I mean, I just would slow down, start asking questions, because I think it's really important for leaders to make important decisions, not urgent ones. Now, some of them are urgent, right? I don't want to imply that you don't make urgent decisions. If you think about what I'm trying to do from an agency standpoint of sending humans into space, making decisions on the risk associated with something we don't know, we don't understand completely, right? We can't model it the way we want to model it, so that the public doesn't recognize the extent of our ignorance, right? That's a big discussion that you have to have. So you have to have as much data as you can, but you can't let the data kill you either. Because in my world, and Larry can speak to this, we will let data, I mean, we got to have 100% of the data before we move on. But that's not what leaders are paid for. Leaders are paid for, let's get moving, let's move on. But I think if you just take, as I call it, if you just take 30 seconds to be intentional about it, you'll be okay. We used to talk about the fact that the problem with urgent is that it will drive you to make a decision that's really fast. A buddy of mine, we used to talk about the fact that don't make a decision before it's time. Now, I realize that's a decision that you didn't make, you chose not to make it. Don't make a decision before it's time. Same as don't cross the bridge before you get to it. That's called a cliff. Right? You have to recognize when you're in that situation. I also think that the tyranny of urgent drives us to do things sometimes that doesn't allow other people to play in what we're trying to do. So for me, at NASA, we had a lot of good folks, and sometimes people would get left out because what you would do, if you were asked to do an urgent decision, you need to assign somebody to go work this particular program or this particular project. You already have a mental Rolodex who that should be. We all have that. We all have our own set of folks that we're going to pick for any job that we want to get, right? And I think that mental Rolodex really makes it hard for us to actually, give somebody else to let them do something. Okay, so I'm always going to pick Warren to do this job. This job comes along, give it to Warren, it's off my back, I'm done, because I'm going to take care of it. If I give it to Scott, I might actually have to talk to Scott, right? I actually have to coach it. Oh, it's just energy off of me as a leader, right? So think about the opportunity you have on these urgent decisions to maybe stop, take a breath, and give it to somebody else and let them go work it for you. The other tyranny is one that I talked about a lot at NASA, is the tyranny of or instead of the power of and. There's a book on this. It's a pretty interesting book. But if you've ever thought about how many times we get faced as leaders with or, this or that. If you take the word or out and put and in there, it's pretty amazing how it changes the way you look at the situation. This and that. Now do a silly thing here. So milk or cookies or milk and cookies, right? A lot better when you put the and in there. For us at NASA, it was human or robotic exploration. Are we going to say humans or robots? Well, no, we're going to do both. Humans and robots. That's how we're going to explore, right? The robots are going to be our scouts and the humans are going to come behind. But if you just focus on one, you totally lose the piece of that. And I think that's a tyranny we get thrown at a lot in our daily lives. And then I think, the best example of that probably is the Russians and Americans. When you think about us going together with Russia, it's really fascinating when you think about the geopolitical world that's going on with the United States and Russia. In space, it hasn't been affected at all. In fact, it's about the only thing that hasn't been affected. All the folks in the U.S. have been kicked out of Russia except for the NASA team. And as the State Department left, they took my guy that runs the space part over in Moscow and said, well, hang in there, you're our last hope, right, to keep us together. But space has always been that kind of a collaboration. But if you take Americans and Russians, right, you say, okay, we're going to design a capsule. You may not know that Russians lost a crew years ago because their capsule depressurized. So everybody died when it came home. We lost one because of fire, I talked about it earlier. So the two together have probably been designing a pretty good spacecraft. You've got lessons learned that you can pull forward. So that's the power of and versus the tyranny of or. The last tyranny I'll throw at you is the tyranny of TMI. Too much information. Good Lord, today we get too much information. When I grew up at Marshall Space Flight Center, our first class we had to take was how do you tell the center director at Marshall Space Flight Center what you're working on? They call it the 90-second elevator speech. Now I get an 80 megabyte PowerPoint file that says FYI. Right? What in here is FYI? Right? Can you at least tell me, give me some summary? It's just crazy what's happened from that perspective. And leaders end up feeling overwhelmed, right? When you get everything you're supposed to fill out, what in that 80 megabyte PowerPoint pitch is important. And when you're dealing with human lives, sitting on top of a launch vehicle, you got to kind of get right to the crux of the matter and do it right then. So that's one of the things we used to pay attention to. So that's kind of the tyrannies. Now, here's my top 5 just to throw them at you. And by the way, these changed back in the old days when I was doing this presentation. And being an Alabama fan, you guys would, and most of us in this state understand this, but I used to call this my BCS. It would change every once in a while. We don't have the BCS rankings anymore, but so it moves around depending on my experience and what I've done. Number one thing as a leader, you got to have a positive attitude. There's nothing in this world that you control more than your attitude. No one else controls your attitude as a leader and how you deal with things. Now, I want to be really clear here. I don't mean sunshine and rainbows. I mean people know the person that's, oh, everything's great, it's fine, as the building's falling around and right. No. Or healed. You know, the one that no matter how good it is, look, you just got $10,000. Look how much tax they took. You have to be, come on. You gotta have reality-based optimism is the word I use as a leader, right? Acknowledge the realities, but be optimistic about how you're going to go. I think that's critically important. I think it's one of the few things that you control individually more than anything. I think leading change is the second thing. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. While leading people is the most important, leading change is hard. And you got to stick to it. You got to challenge assumptions. Don't assume your message or getting down through the system. If you look at the 2 failures we had in NASA, as far as the space shuttle goes, this is one of the bigger things we had. Everybody assumed the message was going down, and everybody assumed the message was coming up. And neither was right. Neither was right. So you have to pay attention to that. And it's tough. And you got to recognize people's equity in the status quo. When I was at Marshall Space Flight Center, we were changing one of our organizations. We felt it needed to be more science-based. Everybody told me, don't do that, we're not going to do that. So they went kicking and screaming because I said, do it anyway. Well, I'm not stubborn. About a year later, I noticed it wasn't working, and it's probably the wrong thing to do, right? And so I said, let's go ahead and change it back. Oh, God, no, don't do that, right? The same people that didn't want to change the first time didn't want to change back, right? Because they had the equity in the status quo. Probably the most important one for me is my number 3 one is, and this is tough for me because I'm an extrovert, is listen with the intent, or without the intent of responding. Now, this comes about, we were having a particular telecom once around, there was an engine that had a pretty significant challenge technically. And I had 2 different viewpoints going on the phone call. One was sitting in the office with me, and the other one was on the phone out in California. And the guy in the office with me just could not stand the person in California. And so the dude in California was talking, and was making a very reasonable argument, but the other guy was already up on with his finger on the mute button, just waiting for that guy to take a breath so he could say what he wanted to say. And so another buddy pulled him back in the chair and said, would you please listen without the intent of responding? You might learn something, right? And so I think too often we're too busy trying to get back, trying to make our point, that we don't hear what the point is being made. I see that quite often today in our political world, but hey, we won't go there. When I was in D.C., I certainly saw that probably more than I wanted to. And a quote that I absolutely love and used to use with my team all the time is, wisdom is the reward you get for a lifetime of listening when you have preferred to talk. That's where you really become wise. You hear other people, and that helps you as a leader going forward. I think the last thing in my leadership tenets that I'll share is you have to have the courage to handle unjust criticism. Right? Our job as a leader is not to make everyone happy, but it is for our people to be heard. But then you got to make a decision and move on. Winston Churchill, you have enemies, good. That means you stood up for something sometime in your life. All right, so it's tough. And I think, I can't give you the formula for success, but I can give you the formula for failure, which is try to please everybody. Purposeful. So I do think it's lonely. I think what you have to do, my favorite quote is on my wall from Teddy Roosevelt, The Man in the Arena. How many people have heard that quote, know that quote? I won't bore you with it if you want to hear it. But it's not the critic that counts. It's the person that's actually doing the work in the arena, covered with blood and sweat, versus the cold tended souls that are sitting in the audience and love to just throw rocks. So those of you that are out on a football game and you boo the team and you've never played football in your life, that's what I'm talking about. So I think just a couple other things that we've had to deal with at the agency that I think are important, and I'll open up for questions because I could talk about NASA stories all day long. I'd rather just hear what you guys want to know. But I think it's from a leadership perspective, you have to understand and admit your weaknesses. And surround yourself with people that have strengths where you have a weakness. We used to, as part of our executive selection process, I used to always ask, what are your 3 weaknesses? And most people, because 3 is hard. 1's easy. Right? You can always come up with 1 weakness, right? Well, I'll give you a story here. But I had someone come in the office and interview my leading candidate for the job. My leading candidate. I did a poor job of preparing him, obviously, because I said, hey, what are your top 3 weaknesses? And he sat there and he just looked around. He goes, I don't have any. And I went, you got 1. You got 1 already. I mean, he was going to run one of my engine programs. I mean, this is devastating. I couldn't pick it, right? I had to bring him in afterwards and say, wait, I didn't pick it because, boy, self-awareness. Where'd it go? You need to be more self-aware. But I think that, and I had another guy come in and go, only 3? Right, so do I really care what the weakness is? No, I care more about self-awareness as a leader. To know that they have that, they understand their own self better. I think that you have to recognize the power of a diverse and inclusive workplace, right? I mean, I've seen it work at NASA. If you get, probably the best example of a diverse, inclusive workforce is the Challenger accident. The team that was doing the Writers Commission that was doing the investigation of what happened in Challenger. They're sitting there one day, and Richard Feynman, a scientist, not an engineer, drops a piece of the O-ring into his ice water, right? And the O-ring got really stiff and wouldn't bend. And that ends up being really the cause of the accident, is the O-rings got cold and couldn't seal the joint. Well, engineers, the scientist is the one that came up with that, right? So having a diverse team. And by the way, diversity is much more than race, gender, and ethnicity. Those are critically important. But having a diverse team and a diverse set of thoughts in your decision making helps you make a better decision. And it's critical, at least for us in the agency, it was always critical. I think I just shared, I think, my final one is, and I always tell people this, you gotta have a sense of humor, right? And I mean sense of humor about yourself. Don't ever use your sense of humor on other people. That doesn't work very well for you. Typically, it goes bad quickly. But if you can laugh at yourself, right, and your own inabilities that you have and the challenges you have, it's amazing how that makes your team, it makes you more approachable to your team. I mean, I must have told my team every staff meeting, you guys are so much smarter than me. I need you guys to help me do this for the agency, but you gotta educate me. You gotta bring me up to speed and listen to them. Let them tell you what's going on and laugh at the ability. I used to chuckle at one of my ministers used to say, no person is entirely useless. They can always be used as a bad example. Right? so I think at some point, right, we all find ourselves as that bad example, and I was that way probably more times than I thought. I'll leave you with a couple things here that I think are important, and I think they actually apply to what you do here at Kiwanis. And it's a quote from Major General Perry Smith. Now, those of you that are, he was on CNN during the Desert Storm. He was the guy that did this. And he wrote a book, and as an engineer, he wrote a leadership book that actually has a checklist at the end of every chapter. So as an engineer, I love that, right? Because that means I can just go down the checklist. I like it doesn't work that way, but it's nice to have one in front of me. He had a quote in there that I think is so important, and I think it actually fits your mission, but it also probably fits your mission at your organization that you represent here today. And it's leadership is serving your people, serving the mission, giving power away, and raising the level of dignity and integrity in your organization. There's no activity in the human endeavor that is more fascinating, more challenging, and more rewarding than leading an organization with an important mission. I was fortunate enough to get to lead NASA for 458 days. Right? And I was fortunate enough to run Marshall Space Flight Center where we did all the propulsion systems for the space flight program and then all the future systems. When you get to do that and you get to be part of something that you absolutely know individually you would never have accomplished, it's a pretty amazing feeling. So I wish you best of luck in your missions that you're trying to do not only in your own organizations but here with the Kiwanis. I think you have a really important mission going forward, and I hope some of these lessons will help you as you go forward. And I look for some questions for you guys. Thanks.
All right, how about some questions? Right down here.
Fascinating talk. My daddy worked for NASA, so I'm really interested in what you had to say. Here's my comment. We hear that Apple's not really a phone company, it's a tech company. And Tesla's not a car company, it's a tech company. And I wonder if you say that NASA is not a rocket company, but it's a tech company. If that's true, how do you identify and put yourself in contact with all the just new things that are coming up all along, techniques, formulas, products? How do you stay in touch with all the new stuff?
It's hard, especially when you're a government organization, right? The government, I used to chuckle about it. I would tell people that we're moving into the 90s as fast as we can. the bureaucracy that comes with the government organization is tough. One of the things that we talked about was innovation inside the agency. One of the biggest challenges we had was innovation because everything is dictated to us from Congress when we get our appropriations bills, pretty much very spelled out. It's hard to spend money on things that aren't actually exactly what we're told to do, versus a company that has, internal investment dollars and their own path, their own marketing path, and a risk posture, totally different than the agency, right? Our risk posture is we're pretty risk averse in the agency for a lot of reasons. So what we did, the best example I can give you is back in the 60s when NASA was first getting started, right? When we were doing the poly, we were doing stuff nobody ever done before. And what came out of that was engineering schools at a lot of places, or engineering jobs that didn't necessarily come to the aerospace and defense world, but went to automobile manufacturing, all these different things. We spurred that back in the 60s. The government did when they created this. What's interesting today is it's actually flipped. A lot of these companies are investing in things that we're actually taking advantage of, and I'm going to give you the best example we got is Google, right, has a car, autonomous car that they were working on. The autonomous car, Google actually sits very close to one of our centers in California called Ames Research Center. We actually allowed them to come onto Ames and let their car drive around, right? The deal was we got their algorithms that they built for their car. So all this R&D that they had done, we got the algorithms. The algorithms actually pretty much directly apply to UAVs and to spacecraft in terms of operating autonomously. Just a couple of adjustments, you got another 2 or 3 minutes. Anyway, the point was, the Google cars were driving around, and we had to have all these things signed by our workforce. Somehow they were implied consent that they were now guinea pigs in an experiment. But it all worked out great, where we were taking advantage of the R&D that this nation's doing, right? And we do that in several places. Let private industry go to SpaceX is another great example. Very little investment from NASA into that product. Now we don't get as much insight into it, so that drives some of our engineers crazy. But that's how we do it. We actually try to leverage it instead of create it. Create it in some areas, but leverage it in others. So it's hard to keep up. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on SpaceX and also what China's doing on their explorations?
Yeah, so SpaceX is, they've shifted the paradigm pretty significantly in launch. When we chose SpaceX as a player in this game to do cargo to the International Space Station, we knew it was low risk. Cargo is pretty low risk. I mean, we're going to launch, every 2 or 3 months either way, and we got storage. So it was kind of the mission part was less risky than we wanted. They had to learn a lot. They brought Elon he brought a agile software mentality to the rocket business. So you can only imagine how my guys were like, what? It's totally different. Totally different. I can tell you they did an upgrade to their rocket one time where they got 40 feet longer, about 50,000 pounds more thrust per engine, and they called it a minor modification. Right? My team was just freaking out. They couldn't deal with that at all. They're like, this is a major upgrade. We're going to have to retest everything. It's just a different way of thinking, right? But what I watched the NASA team actually come more toward them. And I watched them learn from us, right? So the mix together was actually pretty good, and we've got a pretty good solution now. They're supposed to fly next month, the first uncrewed flight of their crewed mission. We're going to not have crew on it, but it's their test flight. Hopefully later in the year we'll fly on the other mission. So I think that if you look at how many launches they've returned to American soil, I mean, Russians the Russians lost a lot of launches out of this. Because people went to Russia just because it was cheap. They didn't want to go there, but they went because it was cheap. And Elon's brought that back, or SpaceX has brought that back. As far as the Chinese go, that's an interesting political discussion. I had many conversations with Congressman Wolf, who put some legislation in place years ago about us not being able to work with the Chinese. We're actually not allowed to. We are forbidden by law with working with them. I met with the head of the Chinese Space Agency twice. Because what I was allowed to do is, as long as I did it 30 days in advance to Congress that I was going to meet with them, we were going to meet with them. But it's a tough one because we know what they're doing from an intelligence perspective and stealing things and all that stuff. We also know what we did with the Russians in the 70s, right? That changed that dynamic using space as an integrator. So my personal opinion, I would prefer to work with the Chinese instead of being different because I'm afraid if we don't, a lot of our other partners will go with the Chinese because the Chinese are going to do what they said they're going to do. They're just going to do it. The U.S., we're a little bit too, we can be wishy-washy on what we're doing. So.
Can you comment on your budget and the confluence of the agency versus that of government and how you calibrate all that?
Yeah, so the question was, comment on our budget and how it works with the whole government, right? So NASA is a discretionary agency, so that means that it doesn't have to be funded, as opposed to like Social Security and DOD and things like that, Department of State. So during the shutdown, NASA was shut down. So the NASA folks just went back to work. So they've been shut down for however long that happened. We were part of that for a while. So we're being discretionary. We're in the Commerce, Justice, and Science part of the federal government. NASA's budget's about $20 billion. Most of the folks that I usually ask myself, what percent of the federal budget do you think NASA gets? I usually get a lot bigger numbers than it actually is. 0.4%, or 0.401%. Sorry. So it's not very much of the budget, but it's probably fair. We've actually gone up during the big change between Obama and Trump. That was when we went and did all our. I guess we tried to justify NASA's existence to the new administration. And again, talking about jobs, we were the least worst impacted. So we only got cut by about 0.5% from our budget. Since then, we've gone up. I think we were 18.7 when they came in, and the last budget was proposed was a little over $20 billion. So for NASA, it's been really good from that standpoint. So the challenge we have is that there aren't earmarks anymore, but we get a lot of directed funding, which is another word for earmark. But we kind of get told what to do most of the time. We argue many ways, and there's different ways to talk about it. But I think as one of the staffers that's been up there about 30 years, he says, it's pretty clear that Bill likes NASA about this much. Not going to be much more, not going to be much less. That's about what we're going to get out of the budget. That's right.
I hope you're writing your book, Lightfoot on Leadership, because you've made us laugh, but you've made wonderful points, wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Question is, how can we make you our candidate for president? I'm really not kidding. Or senator or governor. We need your insight, that kind of leadership, and people who can work together. That's what we need. You might say no, but I'm just saying that's what we need.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Having spent 6 years in D.C., I don't want to go back. I got out of there, and I'll tell you, just so you guys know, so I'm a little bit of a feeler too, as much as I am an extrovert. But when I left Marshall Space Flight Center, I left pretty much in tears. Right, I thought I had a job in my life. Stennis Space Center, by the way, which he gives me grief about. I want you to know my wife. When I said we're moving to Stennis, she goes, "We're leaving the 49th state to go to the 50th." Anyway, so down there, I was able to actually run engine testing. I was a rocket engine test guy, right, for years. In fact, Darcy's uncle and I worked together a lot. Great man, her uncle is. But we spent all this time doing dream jobs, right? And when I got an award here last year for my leadership at NASA, and one of the things somebody asked me was, as you move through those opportunities, did you predict this? This is what you said you were going to do? And my answer to everybody was, I said yes a couple of times when I probably should have said no. And the people that took me said yes when they probably should have said no. So I think that's the lesson. But I don't have any desire to go back to D.C. I left Marshall in tears. I left D.C. cheering. I don't think I was in the rearview mirror as I was driving the car. So thank you guys for the time today. I appreciate y'all coming out.
Robert, thanks for those leadership insights, along with a lot of humor. And again, thanks for your willingness to come down here today. Real quick, upcoming programs. Again, hope that all of you who were so dedicated to be here today will come back to these future programs. February 5th, Liz Farrow, our Kiwanis member, is going to lead a program on Venture for America Fellows. Really great insight into how this program works. You're going to hear from some Venture for America Fellows themselves and what they've been doing, what their perspective is on our our city. And these are college grads from all over the country, so I think you'll really enjoy that. February 12th, Brian Maloma, CEO and President of Westervelt. Westervelt, of course, is one of those Alabama companies that are important to our overall economic ecosystem. I think it'll be a real interesting opportunity to hear from Brian and what they're doing. February 19th, John Sherman, President and CEO of Coca-Cola Bottling Company. Again, think about all the expansion and growth that's been going on in Coca-Cola United. It'd be a great chance to hear directly from John what they're doing. And again, one of those iconic Birmingham companies. And then February 26th, for you big sports fans, George Bodenheimer, author of Every Town is a Sports Town. He was formerly president of ESPN and ABC Sports. He's also currently chairing the campaign for the V Foundation for Cancer Research. I think that'll be a wonderful program. Hope you all will be here. Thanks for coming. We are adjourned.